to move on to some definitions. We say that by not supporting something, it means things such as boycotting. We need to prevent these individuals and their work from becoming bigger, more prominent, and more capable of influencing people who watch and enjoy them. And we define art as anything that is an expression or application of human creativity and emotion. So this could be fine art, music, rap, film, or comedy, or anything related to such. And we define morally reprehensible. And we tell you that morally reprehensible can vary from individual to individual. So for sake of this debate, let's use something that we can all agree is morally reprehensible. Things like pedophilia, things like rape. We tell you that we don't need any institution or body to necessarily define what morally reprehensible looks like. And because this is a should motion, we tell you that as an individual, if someone as an individual finds someone's work reprehensible, it is morally correct and okay for them to boycott their work. We have 3 points for you today. The first on retribution. The second on the idea that enjoying these artists' work lowers the quality of said art. And 3 on the idea of tacit approval. But before I move on, yes.
Would you buy art from an artist just because they are altruistic?
No. Oh wait. I'll address that at a later time. So first, on my first point, which on the point of retribution, we tell you that there are multiple forms of justice. The thesis behind this point is that when you continue to watch and enjoy the art of these individuals, you aren't recognizing the harms that they have caused. You aren't recognizing the harms that these actions, that pedophilia, that rape, has caused to another individual. You aren't truly recognizing that people have been hurt by these people, and others are still being hurt by individuals committing the same acts that these artists committed. Let's take Bill Cosby as an example. You are ignoring the fact that he is currently sitting in prison for raping over 30 women and yet still receiving royalties from the reruns of his work. We tell you that people like this need to be disqualified from being able to enjoy the benefits and rewards of being publicly supported. We tell you that the legacies of these people need to be barred. And we need to send a united message as a society that these actions are universally abhorrent. We tell you that that these acts and the legacies of these people should be scrubbed from society's memory. We don't want to support these. We don't want to support these individuals. We don't want to honor them. We don't want to continue their legacy and place them on some pedestal, ignoring their misdeeds just because they may necessarily have been born with some luck of having talent in a given field. But before I move on, sure.
If a guy who owns a company goes to jail because of something morally reprehensible, does that mean that he does not deserve any revenue from his company?
Yes, we tell you that if a person has committed a morally reprehensible act, we tell you that it is more harmful for these people to continue to be rewarded than for them to be paid for their past deeds. Now on to my second point of lowering the quality of art. Sorry. We tell you that an individual and their inherent benefits can never be fully separated from the art that they produce. Art is literally an expression of their emotion, of their thoughts, and of their ideals. So we tell you that it is highly unlikely that they can separate all of this from what they actually produce and what they express in their art. The essence of the work produced by artists are inherently reflective of their beliefs. We can see this with Rodal and his influences in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It is inherently expressive, reflective of his beliefs. We tell you that the beliefs of these artists will always filter into the work that they produce, and we tell you that side opposition needs to prove that an artist's method of expression and emotion and the produced results can always be separated from their emotions. Sure.
If, for example, an artist is very homophobic but staunchly supports through their art feminism, should none of their art be consumed even though it supports a movement like feminism?
We tell you that is highly unlikely. As I have stated in my definition, art is a form of personal expression. Art is a form of art is the expression and application of the artist's emotions, of their beliefs, of their ideals, of their passions. And we tell you that if a person is inherently homophobic, they could not possibly produce art that is at its core supportive of feminism and at its core representative of the feminist movement. And because we support a world where the victims are prioritized over the artists, and because we stand for a world where these people are given the justice that they deserve, and because we believe that there are many forms of justice, I am proud to
If you are an enthusiastic film student, but of course, you as a moral human being don't agree with sexual harassment, we still think that it's fine for you as an individual to support and watch Weinstein films done by Harvey Weinstein. Or in another case, we completely believe that kids should continue to read Roald Dahl because there are positive values in these books that don't necessarily have to be connected to Roald Dahl. The burden of the opposition today is not to support morally reprehensible art, but rather to separate it from the artist, and the proposition made this very clear in their characterization as well. We as the opposition take on the burden that they put on our side. We believe that art is separate of the artist and should remain independent as such, and thus art should remain genuine and a real commentary on humanity. I'll elaborate on this point further in my second substantive. To outline our case, our first substantive. To outline our case, I, the first speaker, will be talking firstly on the cult of personality that is formed when we refuse to acknowledge, when we fail to support certain art by certain artists, and secondly on how we neglect the benefits that these artists may have brought to the world, and lastly my second speaker will elaborate on the idea of how you challenge your own views. Now thank you. But before I go on to our case proper, on to some rebuttals again the first speaker of the proposition. The first speaker of the proposition gave their first substantive on the idea of retribution and how they want to pursue justice. And we think this is a perfectly moral thing to do. However, their problem isn't with the art itself. In fact, their entire argumentation was largely on how the criminal justice system is simply not enough. When we asked them a POI on whether or not they think that it is enough for us to be putting people in jail for their crimes, they said no because these people are being rewarded. However, we do not see that that is the case. We think that putting somebody in jail is already telling them that what they did was reprehensible. We're telling the entire society, for that matter, that what they did was reprehensible. And we believe that individuals can make a judgment themselves, but we do not think that it should be a societal blanket ban on what they've done. No, thank you. And so the proposition problem isn't about the artist or isn't about what they've created, but rather it's about the criminal justice system. And so they've escaped the realms of this debate. And secondly, on their idea of the quality of art, their entire second substantive relied on the idea that one characteristic of an individual applies to every single aspect of their life, namely in this debate, their art. And there's an inherent contradiction in this line of argumentation because they're saying that one bad thing that somebody does defines them entirely. But the contradiction here is that they do not see the positives of this person. Maybe this person loves his family. Maybe this person donates to various causes. However, no, on the proposition side, they only see that one bad thing is defining entirely. And their response to one of our POIs clearly exemplifies this contradiction. When we asked them, would you prefer to buy art exclusively from artists that support altruistic beliefs, their response was no. This is a clear contradiction in their case because their entire second substantive was hung on the premise that art is intrinsically associated with the artist and thus we should look at their art purely based on certain characteristics. But the only characteristics that they're willing to apply to this standard is when the action is reprehensible and not commendable. And thus this is a contradiction in their case. But even if we were to take it a level further, we as the opposition principally believe that the idea of an artist and their art should be separated entirely. So that is where I go into my case proper. On our first substantive, the label of which is the cult of personality that is formed when we fail to recognize the art of certain artists. The thesis of this point is that when we do not support art from morally reprehensible artists, we essentially create a cult of personality around these artists. Let's go back and take a look at the purpose of art in itself. Firstly, the purpose of art is to be a commentary on humanity, is a pursuit of every individual to find out what it means to be human. And so we see that movies constantly do this. They always question the idea, they always question drugs, politics, social values repeatedly, and this is the purpose of art. But before I go on, yes.
But how can art be separate from an individual when it comes from their expression and their views on the world?
I'm getting to that right now, in fact. Because we see that the purpose of art is to be diverse opinions with conflicting and often contentious points, but we see that that is the intrinsic value of art, to be bringing in new opinions that sends a message that is genuine from the artist. However, we furthermore see that this art's message can last after the artist is gone. This art isn't unique to the artist, but this art's message can last for a long period of time after the artist is gone. However, if we fail to support art by specific artists, then we're necessarily tying the art to the artist, and the harms of this is that art no longer is a genuine form of sending a message, but in fact, it just becomes a reflection of the individual, as the proposition continues to argue. And we see this as a harm because then artists are motivated to build a cult of personality around their art, and they're essentially using the art to define themselves rather than creating art that sends a genuine message to the public. And what happens when the artist is trying to create a cult of personality through their art? They essentially try to appeal to more people through their art. It narrows the art, it narrows the opinions within society, as they simply try to make things that more people are happy with, that more people can just accept in a day-to-day life. And so as they appease to more people, we see the effects of very good artists that have very genuine works of art start to make things that are more mainstream and start to make things that don't really question humanity and don't really provide a proper commentary on humanity, but instead just provide information that everybody's just happy to sit around and not really debate. And furthermore, on the more negative side, we see that there will be bad people trying to make themselves look good using this cult of personality, using this relationship between their art and themselves. For example, if we look at artists like Beyonce, who is known for having sweatshops around the world. However, she continues to sing songs that call for feminist messages, and she has become a feminist icon. And so this is where we see the flip side of the coin, where people are able to take advantage of this connection between the art and the artist. And thus, this leads to further cover-ups as the people begin to hide their worst qualities. And so, we see that on two levels. First off, it neglects the purpose of art. It neglects the commentary, the diverse commentary that is necessary in society. And secondly, such a cult-like image-based society would mean that people aren't able to enter the industry at all. Smaller images aren't able to develop a base and be able to compete with larger artists. And now to my second substantive on the idea of neglecting the benefit by certain artists. That is to say, when we simply say that all of the art that these people created is because of one thing they did, everything that they've created was always bad. And that's essentially the side of the proposition. However, we see that this isn't necessarily true. Let's take a look at artists like Banksy. A lot of what Banksy does is inherently illegal and thus we would say morally reprehensible. His graffiti isn't necessarily the best. His graffiti is seen as illegal by many people. However, we see that a lot of his art is socially progressive and are trying to bring about change in society. And thus we see that there is a necessary benefit to what they do. And so we see that it is unjust to neglect all of those benefits by these artists simply based on one thing, which even still is a contradiction on their side. And that is why I'm so proud to oppose.
No, I think it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.